Hey everybody, and welcome to Fright your weekly source for horror reviews. Normally I try to review something new on the show, but this week I thought I'd take a step back and take a look at something that's been around for a while. That's why this week we'll be taking a look at 2009's The Collector. When I first saw this movie in theaters, I confess that I walked out with a somewhat negative impression. It was an alright film, but some of the film's aesthetic choices, namely the Saw-esque lighting, musical choices, and over-reliance on torture porn, as well as the incredibly mean-spirited ending, left me with a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. To be honest, I thought that the film, like so many others of its kind, would quickly fade from memory, but, strangely enough, not only has it gained a cult following, but it's even getting a sequel that comes out today. Anyway, with all that going on, I thought that it might be time for me to take a second look. For those of you who didn't catch it the first time around, The Collector is the story of a thief named Arkin who breaks into a mansion to crack a safe and instead runs afoul of the titular Collector, a serial killer that breaks into people's homes, kidnaps them, and then forces them to run an ungodly array of booby traps that he has set up inside their humble abode. For added hilarity, I like to imagine that the Collector is actually what happened to Kevin from Home Alone when he grew up. Anyway, after giving it a second view, I think I may have judged it a little bit too harshly the first time around, and I'm glad to say that although The Collector isn't for everyone, there are several things to recommend it. First of all, I'm pretty sure the main reason I've had a subtle shift in opinion about this movie is because of the current horror market. When I first watched this movie, it was in a time when pretty much the only horror films Hollywood was putting out were torture porn knockoffs riding on the coattails of Saw and Hostel. By the time this film came out in 2009, I was pretty much burned out on the whole subgenre, but since we have an entirely new wave of mindless imitations to be irritated by, I didn't find the film nearly as offensively derivative the second time around. On closer examination, there are three factors that help to change my opinion. First and foremost, the characters. I didn't appreciate it the first time around, but each of the characters actually seems to behave like a normal, rational human being would, which is surprisingly rare in horror movies, and particularly in this subgenre. On top of this, unlike the despicable gangs of retarded assholes you usually get, I'm looking at you in particular, Saw 3, Arkin is actually a very likable man, and we find ourselves really rooting for this guy. Here's his backstory. From what I can surmise from a deleted scene on the DVD, he's an ex-burglar turned contractor who is only trying to rob the people he's working for to pay off his ex-wife's gambling debts so the loan shark's thugs won't hurt her and his daughter. Not only that, but once he's locked in with the killer, he really does make every effort to save each of the Collector's victims, even going so far as to head back into the house after he's escaped to rescue a small child. Jesus, as far as torture porn protagonists go, this guy's practically George Bailey. And that actually extends to the other characters, who, while not as likable as Arkin, are for the most part actually smart enough to at least let him try to help them. Of course, a decent main character and a good supporting cast are worth absolutely nothing unless you have a good villain, and in this respect, The Collector definitely delivers. The Collector, like his victims, seems to be more realistically written than other horror villains. Despite his somewhat unrealistic booby-trapping and engineering skills, he actually does come well prepared. He even brings an attack dog to guard the outside of the house, and he's not afraid to pick up a shotgun when he's worried his prey might escape. On top of that, unlike Freddy, Jason, or even Jigsaw, the Collector isn't infallible. He makes mistakes. Hell, he doesn't even realize Arkin is in the house for half the movie, he's susceptible to being taunted, and he even winds up nearly getting killed before he escapes at the end. Some might say it makes him less frightening, but in my opinion it makes him more realistic, and therefore scarier than Jigsaw's increasingly improbable planning skills. And if you think I'm mentioning Saw quite a bit, there's actually a good reason for that. The two men most responsible for this film, Marcus Dunstan and Patrick Melton, have worked on a number of Saw films, and it's really obvious that this movie has Saw in its DNA. Everything from the lighting to the booby traps feels like it was borrowed from the set of the other series, but hey, given that it's from the same director, at least I can't claim that he's ripping off another director's work. And speaking of the director, that actually brings me to the second thing that I like about this movie. Despite the fact that this is an independently financed movie, it never once shows its budget, and it's obvious that whether the viewer likes it or not, this was obviously a labor of love for the filmmakers. The film looks just as slick as its Hollywood counterparts, and not only that, but it seems that when he's given free rein with his own script, Dunstan is actually a very talented visual storyteller, and there are a lot of awesome moments that make me rather interested in the filmmaker's future projects. The third thing I like about this movie is that it takes something that's been done before and adds just enough originality to it to make it seem fresh. While the whole people trapped in a booby-trapped house thing has been done before, the fact that the Collector does it in your own home makes it that much more terrifying, turning the familiar into something dangerous. Of course, if he were to do that in my house, he'd probably be pretty disappointed in my performance, since I can't even get up at night without stubbing my toe in the dark. Having said all that, there are still a few things that I don't like about the film, including most of the musical score, and the fact that it seems so damn mean-spirited at times, especially the ending. To be honest, I think that by making the main characters decent people, the filmmakers were actually shooting themselves in the foot in a way. I mean, in the Saw films, the fact that the people being tested are assholes makes things a little bit easier to bear. If they live, they've probably learned their lesson. If not, well, then they weren't any great loss to society. Here, because we actually like these characters, it hurts to see them having the rug jerked out from under them. To be honest, it really hampered my enjoyment of the film, and I sincerely hope they correct those flaws in the sequel, which I will be watching later today. Anyway, that's all we have for this time. See you next time on Fright Bites.